The streets of General Santos were buzzing with excitement on that humid September morning. Manny Pacquiao had returned to his hometown after another spectacular victory in the ring, but this time something was different. The man who once sold donuts on street corners to survive now carried on his shoulders not only the glory of world boxing, but also the weight of a revelation that would forever change his perspective on life. The airport was packed with fans screaming his name, but Manny could barely smile. His eyes, normally bright after each victory, carried a deep melancholy. During the flight from Las Vegas home, he had received a call that left him in shock. An elderly man, dressed as a simple airport cleaning worker, had been hospitalized in critical condition, and his last request was to speak with the champion. The crowd respectfully parted when Manny asked to go directly to the hospital instead of participating in the planned reception party. His advisors tried to dissuade him, arguing about commitments with media and sponsors, but the boxer was unwavering. There was something in that man's voice during the call that had deeply touched his heart, a strange familiarity he couldn't explain. General Santos General Hospital had never received such an important visit. Nurses and doctors crowded the corridors, whispering among themselves about the national hero's presence. Manny walked through the sterile corridors with heavy steps, his mind wandering through memories of his difficult childhood, when he himself had spent nights in public hospitals, waiting for free treatment for his family. Upon reaching room 237, Manny encountered a man of approximately 70 years, thin and weakened by illness. His calloused hands told a story of a life of hard work, and his eyes, even though weakened, shone with an intensity that the boxer immediately recognized. It was the same look he saw in the mirror during his most difficult training sessions, the determination of someone who fought against all odds. The elderly man smiled weakly upon seeing Manny enter the room. In the first words he whispered, it became clear that this encounter would not be just another courtesy visit. He revealed that he had worked silently for decades, investing every peso he earned cleaning the airport in small local businesses, always with one goal in mind: to help poor children like Manny had been. Unaware of the presence of Filipino media representatives who had discreetly followed the champion's convoy, the first images of this unexpected encounter began to be captured. It was the beginning of a story that would touch millions of hearts around the world, a story about kindness, humility, and the transformative power of gratitude. The man in the hospital bed introduced himself as Alfredo Cruz, and his voice trembled as he told his extraordinary story. For 30 years, he had worked as a janitor at Manila's International Airport, saving every peso he earned to create what he called the Invisible Angels program. For 3 decades, Alfredo had identified talented children in vulnerable situations, silently paying for their training, equipment, and even food. Tears began to well up in Manny's eyes when Alfredo revealed that he had followed his career from the beginning. The elderly man had been present at every important fight of the boxer, not in VIP bleachers, but hidden in the cheapest sections, cheering with his heart in his hands. He confessed that he always believed Manny represented everything he stood for, that talent and determination can overcome any obstacle. Alfredo opened a drawer beside his bed and pulled out an envelope yellowed by time. Inside were newspaper clippings from all of Manny's fights, faded photos, and more impressively, a handwritten list with the names of 247 children he had helped over the years. Manny recognized some of the names, young athletes who now represented the Philippines in international competitions, never knowing who their anonymous benefactor had been. The most shocking moment came when Alfredo revealed that his wealth didn't come only from decades of savings. He had discovered years ago that he was the sole heir to a forgotten family empire: lands, properties, and investments worth millions of pesos. But instead of changing his life, Alfredo chose to maintain his simple routine, using his fortune exclusively to help others achieve their dreams. Alfredo's breathing was becoming increasingly labored, but he insisted on continuing. With trembling hands, he handed Manny a key and a legal document. It was the deed to his empire, leaving everything to the Manny Pacquiao Foundation, along with detailed instructions on how to continue the program he had created. Alfredo wanted his inheritance to be used to multiply help for needy children throughout the country. Manny held the old man's hand, feeling the immense responsibility being placed on his shoulders. It wasn't just money. It was the legacy of a lifetime dedicated to serving others. Alfredo smiled one last time, whispering that his greatest joy had been seeing Manny become not just a champion in the ring, but a champion of the Filipino people. The cameras that had captured fragments of this encounter began broadcasting live images, without Manny realizing. The entire country was watching a moment of pure human emotion, seeing their national hero being deeply touched by the generosity of a simple man who had dedicated his life to creating opportunities for others. Alfredo passed away peacefully in the early hours of the following morning, leaving Manny in deep reflection about his own life and purpose. The boxer spent the entire day in silence, walking through the city that raised him, watching barefoot children playing in the streets, exactly as he did decades ago. The news of Alfredo's inheritance and his decision to leave everything to Manny's foundation had spread quickly, generating national commotion. That night, while organizing Alfredo's belongings, Manny found something the old man had kept with great care: a letter from Manny's mother, Dionysia Pacquiao, written years ago. Alfredo had somehow intercepted this letter, which never reached the champion's hands. In the letter, his mother expressed concerns about how fame and money could change her son, begging him never to forget his humble origins. Emotion overcame Manny as he read his mother's caring and prophetic words. Donor Dionysia wrote about dreams she had where she saw Manny not just as a famous boxer, but as a man who would use his influence to lift others who had fallen. She specifically mentioned a vision where she saw her son reading her words before crowds, touching hearts and inspiring change. Seized by sudden inspiration, Manny decided he would honor both Alfredo and his mother in a way no one expected. Without consulting his advisors, he called the national television network GMA, asking for live time during prime time. His request caused frenzy in the studios. Manny Pacquiao wanted to make a national statement, and no one knew exactly what he planned to say. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, not only the Philippines, but the entire world was talking about Manny's mysterious television appearance. Social media exploded with speculation. Would it be a retirement announcement? A political statement? No one could imagine it was something much deeper and personal. At the GMA network studio in Manila, tension was palpable. Technicians ran back and forth, adjusting equipment for what promised to be one of the most watched moments in Filipino television. Manny arrived accompanied only by his wife Jean Key and his children, carrying with him his mother's letter and a photo of Alfredo Cruz. While final preparations were being made, Manny closed his eyes and remembered Alfredo's words about being an invisible angel for those in need. He had made a decision that would change not only his own life, but potentially the lives of thousands of Filipino children. It was time to show the world what it truly means to be a champion. At exactly 8:30 p.m., the cameras began capturing images that would be broadcast live to more than 30 million Filipinos. Manny sat in a simple chair, wearing not his usual champion attire, but a modest white barong Tagalog, the same type of clothing he wore in childhood for special occasions. His eyes were red, revealing the emotional weight of the moment he was about to experience. The silence in the studio was sepulchral when Manny began speaking directly to the cameras. Without reading from a teleprompter or following a script, he told the story of Alfredo Cruz, the simple man who dedicated his life to lifting others without ever seeking recognition. His voice broke periodically, especially when describing the old man's calloused hands and his last smile before dying. Television viewership grew every minute. In the simplest homes of Manila to the mansions of Makati, entire families stopped their activities to watch the national hero share his pain and admiration for a man few knew. The streets became deserted, bars silenced their music, and even street vendors stopped to find a television where they could follow the broadcast. Then came the moment no one expected. Manny carefully removed his mother's yellowed letter, explaining how it had been kept by Alfredo for years, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. With trembling hands, he unfolded the delicate paper, and the cameras zoomed in on the handwritten words in Filipino, with Manny Pacquiao's characteristic handwriting. Manny's voice completely failed when he began reading the first words of the letter. Tears flowed freely down his face as he translated his mother's words into English, allowing Filipinos around the world to understand. Dona Dionysia had written about her hope that her son would use his fame to be a light in the darkness of others, to remind the world that true greatness comes from serving others. In the studio, there wasn't a dry eye. Experienced cameramen wiped tears while keeping their cameras steady. The production crew itself was visibly emotional, some sobbing openly as they watched one of the most genuine and touching moments ever broadcast on Filipino television. As Manny continued reading, social media around the world exploded with millions of people sharing the broadcast. The video of the letter reading went viral instantly, spreading across all platforms within minutes. People of all nationalities, many who weren't even boxing fans, shared clips of the broadcast with comments about how that moment had unexpectedly touched their hearts. Dona Dionysia's words in the letter revealed a deep maternal wisdom, as if she knew that one day her son would be in exactly that position. She had written about hope, about the duty of the blessed to bless others, and about how true victory doesn't happen in the ring, but in the hearts we touch throughout life. Each word seemed to have been chosen specifically for this moment, like a prophecy being fulfilled before the eyes of millions. Manny stopped reading when he reached a specific part of the letter where his mother mentioned Alfredo Cruz by name, something that shocked everyone, including the boxer himself. Dionysia had written about a dream where she saw an angel disguised as a janitor, working silently to create opportunities for poor children, and how she felt this angel would one day touch her son's life in an important way. The revelation that his mother knew Alfredo, or at least had dreamed of him years before, created an almost mystical atmosphere in the studio. The cameras captured the exact moment Manny realized this connection, his face expressing a mixture of amazement, gratitude, and a deep understanding that there were greater forces working in his life beyond his comprehension. On the other side of the screens, Filipino families embraced each other crying, seeing in that moment not just their idol's emotion, but a reflection of their own hopes and struggles. Fathers who worked multiple jobs to give their children opportunities saw in Alfredo a reflection of their own sacrifices. Mothers recognized in Dionysia's words their own advice whispered in nightly prayers. Abroad, Filipino Americans gathered in community centers in Los Angeles, New York, and other cities, watching collectively and sharing stories about their own immigration journeys and sacrifices. Many reported how their own mothers had made similar sacrifices, working in humble jobs to give their children opportunities. Manny continued reading, reaching the most emotional part of the letter where Dionysia expressed her pride not for boxing victories, but for the kindness she saw in her son's heart. She wrote about how she had raised Manny to be strong not only with his fists, but with his heart, and how she hoped he would use both to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The moment reached its peak when Manny arrived at the end of the letter, where his mother had written a special blessing. With his voice completely broken by emotion, he read the last words in Filipino, then in English, creating one of the most powerful and unifying moments in Filipino television history. It was as if the entire country was being blessed through the words of a simple mother who understood, before anyone else, her son's true destiny. As Manny carefully folded the letter and held it against his chest, something extraordinary was happening around the world. The broadcast had been simultaneously translated into dozens of languages, and people of all nationalities were sharing the moment on social media. Hollywood celebrities, international politicians, and religious leaders posted messages of admiration for the humility and genuine emotion demonstrated by the Filipino champion. In the studio, Manny paused for a long time before continuing. When he finally spoke again, It was to announce a decision that caught everyone by surprise. Inspired by his mother's words and Alfredo Cruz's example, he revealed that he would launch a national movement called Invisible Godfathers, where ordinary people would connect directly with children in need, creating a person-to-person mentoring network. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Any Filipino, regardless of income, could become an invisible godfather, dedicating a few hours a week to mentor a child in their community. It wasn't about money, but about time, attention, and care. Manny explained that Alfredo had shown that we don't need to be rich to change lives. Sometimes we just need to be present. Phone calls began flooding the broadcaster. Ordinary Filipinos called crying, immediately offering themselves as volunteers. Retired teachers wanted to teach children after school hours. Mechanics offered to teach their trades. Single mothers wanted to share their experiences with other young women struggling. The response was so overwhelming that the broadcaster's phone system crashed. International media outlets that had initially covered the event as a curiosity began to recognize the magnitude of the moment. CNN International, BBC, and other major outlets did special broadcasts about the impact of reading the letter. Sports commentators from around the world declared they had witnessed something much greater than any victory in the ring. At the hospital where Alfredo had died, nurses and doctors watched the broadcast crying, many finally recognizing who the simple man was who had spent his last hours among them. Several professionals immediately offered to participate in the movement, wanting to dedicate their time off to care for sick children from poor families. The broadcast extended far beyond the planned time, but no one at the station dared interrupt it. It was evident they were documenting a historical moment, something that would be remembered and replayed for generations. Manny continued talking about his vision, his voice gradually regaining strength as he found renewed purpose in his pain. With the letter still pressed against his chest, Manny looked directly into the cameras and made a promise that would echo far beyond that night. He swore to personally visit each of the 81 provinces of the Philippines over the next 2 years, not as a celebrity making appearances, but as an ordinary Filipino talking with families about how they could help each other through the Invisible Godfathers movement. The determination in Manny's voice was palpable as he detailed how the movement would work. He explained that he would train community leaders in each province to identify children who needed mentoring and connect them with local adults willing to donate their time. The program would be completely decentralized. No bureaucracy, no hierarchies, just Filipinos caring for Filipinos. Unexpectedly, Manny then called his wife Jean Key and his children to join him on set. With his family gathered around him, he announced that his decision had been made with the full support of his family, who understood that this was bigger than personal wealth or comfort. His children, some still too small to fully understand the magnitude of the moment, nonetheless sensed the gravity and stood solemnly beside their father. The camera captured the moment when Manny's youngest daughter, apparently without fully understanding the situation, reached up and wiped a tear from his face. This simple gesture of a child comforting her father created one of the most powerful images ever captured on Filipino television, symbolizing hope for the future and the continuation of values across generations. Manny then announced that he would personally dedicate half of his time over the next years traveling through the islands, not staying in luxury hotels, but in the homes of ordinary families, eating at their tables, sleeping in their simple beds. He wanted to truly understand each community's needs and see how ordinary people could transform into invisible angels for their neighbors. The broadcast was approaching 3 hours, but audience ratings remained at record levels. International attention had grown so much that major global networks began offering significant amounts for exclusive interviews with Manny about his decision. However, he politely declined all requests, stating that this moment was about service, not self-promotion. As the broadcast began to wind down, Manny made a final statement that would become iconic. He looked directly into the camera and said that Alfredo Cruz had shown him that true championship isn't measured by belts or trophies, but by the lives you touch and the hope you create in others. He declared that from that day forward, every fight he took would be dedicated to inspiring more Filipinos to become invisible godfathers, transforming his boxing career into a platform for connecting communities. Months after that historic broadcast, the impact of Manny's decision was visible throughout the entire archipelago. The Invisible Godfathers movement had spread organically, without the need for offices or bureaucracies. In remote barangays of Mindanao, retired teachers taught children to read. In Manila slums, mechanics taught young people their trades. On isolated islands of Visayas, experienced fishermen passed their techniques to the next generation. What most impressed observers was how the movement transcended social classes. Business executives in Makati offered to teach business skills to young entrepreneurs. Filipino domestic workers abroad sent money not to their own families, but to pay for school supplies for orphan children. Jeepney drivers created routes of kindness, offering free transportation for children to go to school. A year after the broadcast, Manny fulfilled his promise to visit all 81 provinces. But his visits weren't media events. They were intimate moments where he sat with simple families, listened to their stories, and helped connect people who could help each other. Amateur photographs of these visits circulated on social media, showing Manny eating at humble tables, sleeping in simple beds, always listening more than speaking. The annual letter reading became an informal national tradition. On the anniversary of that broadcast, Filipinos around the world gathered in their homes to read letters from their own mothers, share stories about people who had helped them silently, and commit to acts of kindness in the coming year. Schools dedicated the day to community projects, and churches organized Invisible Angels Masses. Manny Pacquiao, now elderly, became a beloved figure in her own right. During Manny's travels through the provinces, she often accompanied him, not as a celebrity's mother, but as a Filipino mother who understood other mothers' struggles. Her simple conversations with rural families became legendary, and often her words of encouragement were remembered more than Manny's speeches. Years later, when journalists asked Manny about that night when he read his mother's letter on television, he always mentioned that it wasn't just about the letter or even about Alfredo Cruz. It was about recognizing that every person has the potential to be someone's angel, whether visible or invisible. He learned that true strength doesn't come from what you can achieve for yourself, but from what you can make possible for others. The Invisible Godfathers movement eventually became a model studied by sociologists worldwide. Universities sent researchers to understand how a single act of compassion, witnessed by millions, could create such lasting social change. But for the children whose lives had been transformed, academic analysis mattered less than the simple reality that someone had believed in them when no one else would. The letter itself, now preserved under special glass at the National Museum of the Philippines, continued to attract visitors from around the world. People would stand in silence, reading Dionysia's handwritten words about hope, sacrifice, and the power of using one's gifts to serve others. Many visitors left their own letters, to their children, to their parents, to strangers who might need hope, creating an impromptu memorial to the power of written words to convey love and inspire action across generations. If you like this kind of story, leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on the next videos.